Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the My Life in Law broadcast and editorial review, broadcasting from the beautiful San Francisco Mountains here in Missouri, which make up the heart of the Ozarks. The My Life in Law broadcast and editorial review is an educational service brought to you for the public's interest, and I'm your host and narrator, David Meese. It is our goal here at the My Life in Law broadcast and editorial review to bring you, the listener, vital information on law, science, politics, health, religion, history, news, economics, and current events with a no-spin factual approach. So stay tuned for tonight's broadcast on How I Came Out of the System, Part 3. A word of caution and notice to the My Life in Law broadcast and editorial review listeners. Any statements or discussions made by this host are in no way to be construed as legal advice, and are merely my thoughts and opinions I formed over the 30-plus years of study, observation, and using American jurisprudence, and over 30-plus years of scriptural study with the last 20 years of living and practicing what some may call the Mosaic Law. It is the nature of law to be both impartial and yet specific to each individual, and as life is with any individual, it is to each at his own risk and to each at his own peril. And with that said, I would like to welcome you to another broadcast of the My Life in Law broadcast and editorial review, and today's topic of How I Came Out of the System, Part 3. And once again, for clarification purposes, I'm not a licensed attorney, nor are the things that I am saying to be construed as legal advice. I'm simply sharing my story of how I left what I call the secular system and returned to what my understanding is of the biblical system, or what some may call the Mosaic Law, which is also identified as the common law lifestyle. In Part 2 of How I Came Out of the System, I gave you all of the case law that you'll need to understand the objective and the means to come out of her. And in this part, we are going to discuss the Doctrine of Fraud statute, which is the tool that we'll use to rescind all the covenants / contracts we have with the Babylonian system, and how to return to a life of just weights and measures and following the way that Yahuah gave us to live a blessed life. So, when you rescind a contract, at least this is the action that I took. I did it under the statute of frauds doctrine. So I claimed fraud. Now, to identify what a fraud is, and this is legal definitions. Fraud is a misinterpretation of the true facts. It can be done by a look or a gesture. It does not have to be done by word or deed. It is anything that could deceive you into acting upon the untruth that caused you damage. Fraud is a false representation of a matter of fact, whether by word or by conduct, by false or misleading allegations, or by concealment of what should have been disclosed. Anything that deceives and is intended to deceive another so that the individual will act upon it to his or her legal injury. The relationship between parties can make a difference in determining whether a statement is fraudulent. A misleading statement is more likely to be fraudulent when one party has superior knowledge in the transaction and knows that the other is relying on that knowledge. Misleading statements are most likely to be fraudulent where one party exploits a position of trust and confidence, or a fiduciary relationship. Fiduciary relationship includes those between attorneys and clients, physicians, patients, stockbrokers and clients, officers, partners of a corporation, stockholders. In our case, it's going to be whoever is representing a government entity that's offering a benefit, such as Social Security Administration, etc. Even the hospitals, whenever you are in the hospital and they keep trying to force a Social Security number on a person, newborn, they are in the driver's seat of that process, and it would be proper to claim fraud. Most people are very vulnerable at that time, and the hospitals, along with the state, have made it a structure point where they offer or / insist on a newborn getting a birth certificate. That's all my personal observations there anyway. A statement need not be affirmative to be fraudulent. When a person has a duty to speak, silence may be treated as a false statement. This can arise if a party who has knowledge of a fact fails to disclose it to another party who is justified in assuming its non-existence. For example, if a real estate agent fails to disclose that a home is built on a toxic waste dump, the omission may be regarded as a fraudulent statement. Even if the agent does not know of the dump, the omission may be considered fraudulent. This is constructive fraud, and it is usually inferred when a party is a fiduciary and has a duty to know of and disclose particular facts. Now, that's the definition of a fraud, and the things that we are going to rescind fall under those. The next thing you have to understand is when the courts and the lawmakers write what a tort is, when they identify a tort, say as negligence or tortious interference or whatever it is, those things have elements, and they have to meet the elements, let's say, to prosecute you. So if you were being sued for a civil case for negligence, there would be so many elements to that charge, and if you don't fulfill them all, then you're not guilty of that accusation. So when we claim fraud under the statute of frauds doctrine, we see that there's a little bit of a divide. There's 5 elements in a criminal fraud, and what I get out of the civil, because we're writing notice to somebody, so there's 3 elements within that they need to be notified of, because we're not trying to prove them wrong in a court of law right then and there. We are trying to put them on notice that we are quitting the contract, that we are stopping. So, and be sure you write these down, because these will have to go in your rescission letter. And when I say that, I'll explain it here in a minute. Let's just read what they are. So, 3 elements to claim a fraud and rescind the contract. Know that our intent is to notify the other party that we do not intend, nor will we further continue in the covenant / contract. This is slightly different, in my opinion, than proving a fraud as a matter of a criminal or a civil offense in court. We're simply, plainly, and factually noticing the other party that we quit. We will not perform further on the contract, covenant, due to fraud on their part. With that said, claiming fraud in a letter of rescission, we need to claim and or expose the 3 elements of the fraud, as opposed to some court case that claims the 5 elements. This aligns closer with, the 5 elements align closer with the criminal conviction or civil claim after you've actually sued somebody, if it ever comes to that. I've never seen that whenever somebody rescinds a social security number or birth certificate. They really don't even respond. If you request, say, you request a response on a letterhead, I have had agencies will send you a confirmation that they received and rescinded as requested. That happened with my driver's license and my voter's registration, but Social Security Administration didn't bother to even acknowledge my letter, and that's not a big deal. It doesn't matter if they acknowledge it. There's no forms for this. This is you saying I quit. And that's, if you ever have to defend that position, that's exactly what you're going to say in court. That I rescinded my contract on this date, and that's the way it is. I'm not going to perform. Nobody can make you, and so on and so forth. So, number 1, here's the 3 elements. So make sure you write them down. The claimant must, upon discovery of the fraud, announce his purpose to quit performance and adhere to it. If he further treats the property as his own, his right is lost to claim the fraud. In other words, once you claim fraud, you can't use that thing again. You'll lose your right to claim fraud. You can only do this once. So once you've done it, make sure that you're ready to do it when you do it. But remember the wording there. The claimant must, upon discovery of the fraud, announce his purpose to quit performance. That means that in your letter, hey, I just discovered. That's what it needs to sound like. It's been brought to my attention, something like that. Okay, the second is the purpose to rescind. If on the grounds of fraud, must be announced promptly, unconditionally, and unevasively upon the discovery of the fraud. And that's just what it sounds like. I will not perform on this contract any further. I've been frauded. You just plainly say it. Number 3, to rescind an executed contract for alleged false representation, the fraud must be made clearly to appear, and it must be shown that the complainant has been injured and deceived thereby. So you have to have an injury, and you want to show that you're injured. Now, we're doing this for a religious objection. So the injury is our inheritance and our benefits. There's 33 articulated benefits in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, in which you avail yourself from those benefits by having these contracts. And maybe your mom and dad didn't tell you that when you got your Social Security number. Maybe you haven't realized it until at the very moment you're writing this letter. Hey, I just realized, and that's good enough for religious objection. I just realized that hey, this is causing me a damage. That my Elohim, my Creator, told me that I can't make covenants and contracts with foreigners, foreign and alien gods, or other sovereigns. And if I do, then I'm cut off. And again, go back to where we can plead loss. There's plenty of verses where if you do this or that, you're cut off. And that's exactly what that means. Now, I got the 3 elements, and you can look this case up too, and you'll need this. It is Shapiro versus Goldberg at 192, U.S. 232, 24, SUP, that's S-U-P, period, C-T, period, 259, 48, L, ED 410. And that gives the elements of fraud. Now, if you can't ever, if for some reason you can't find a case by Googling it, you can just Google that. What are the elements of fraud? And things will pop up to show you. And you can do that with anything that you're trying to do, whether you're accusing somebody of harassment or stealing or negligence. Look those elements up. Did they fulfill all the elements of that crime or the thing that you're accusing them of? If they did, well, then you have a legitimate averment, a legitimate statement to make. Okay, so that is how you rescind. There's no forms to fill out. This has to be your story of why you rescinded. Now, I'll go ahead and touch base on one of my rescission letters so you kind of get an idea. So this isn't going to be pretty. I'm just going to try to browse over what I did. So I titled my rescission letter, Notice, Rescission, Revocation of Power, Asseveration. I put my name, David Meese, an American by birth, and I tell them my city and so on and so forth. And that I am, to the best of my knowledge, and to notice the Social Security Administration of my intent and refusal to perform or participate in the social welfare scheme commonly known as Social Security Program. And for religious objections, I rescind, revoke, reclaim my capacity that I unwillingly was deceived into giving up by fraud. Okay. And then I've done a pretty long letter here. I won't say I didn't. I think I have 12 chapters, I guess, to this, where I go by and I give them dates and times. I give them Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution, that my covenant negotiated by Moses in 1487 BC. I go on to use the 4 chapters against contracts with other sovereigns that we gave out of the scripture, and that I was under the impression and was led to believe that Social Security was mandatory when it's not, and so on and so forth. So I fulfilled all of my elements to claim fraud, and I also explained why I was doing it. So I put my religious objection in there, I put verses in there, and I explained that it was misrepresented to me or my parents, and so on and so forth, and that my damage was exactly what I said earlier, that my inheritance in the kingdom of Israel and the 33 articulated benefits in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 38 were at risk, and I was at risk of losing them if I stayed in the contract. And that's what you're trying to do. It's really not rocket science. It has to be in your words. And here's why, and this is a good thing to kind of flow over into the next part of this, which is to explain what Seeger versus U.S., the case law, is truly about. And in Seeger versus U.S., the court came up with kind of a test to tell if somebody truly believes what they're saying. And that's fair. Now, the court can't judge what you're saying, if it's true or not, as far as what you believe. They can't say, hey, that's a crazy belief. They can't do that. No one on earth is going to do that to you, not in any Saxon country anyway, in the court. And remember, you have Congress and you have the court and you have the Bible all telling you to follow your Creator. And they're all encouraging you to. So the court wants to help you with this, but they have to do their duty too. So for some reason, if for some reason someone ends up in court and they should make a motion, this is religious objection, and I want to go over Seeger versus U.S. And this is what it says. This is from the Supreme Court, Seeger versus U.S. A person's belief must be truly and sincerely held and are in his own scheme of things religious. The individual's belief in a relationship to a supreme being involving duties superior to those arising from any human relationship, but essentially not including any political, sociological, philosophical views, or merely a personal moral code. So it's telling you what you have to be, and it's telling you what you can't be. So the elements of that it must be a duty, that you feel it's a duty to your Creator in your own scheme of things in a religious manner, that your truly and sincerely religious belief is in a supreme being, and it involves duties superior to those arising from any human relationship. That's what it must be. What it can't be is a political reason, a sociological reason, a philosophical reason, or a personal moral code. They won't give you religious objection if you make a statement that would include any of those things. Politics, political, sociological, philosophical, or personal moral code will not pass the Seeger versus U.S. test. It has to be your sincerely held belief. It doesn't have to be correct. They can't tell you you're wrong or right. It just has to be your belief. And it's to a supreme being with a relationship that is above any human relationship, and that you have a duty to do that. So that's how Seeger versus U.S. works for anybody that is accused of something, and if it involves your religious objection. Now, with that said, I would say this. When you go to do your Social Security number, make sure that all your taxes have been filed, that you're done. Now, as far as paid, that's a different story. I believe there is some kind of prosecution on unpaid taxes. You need to check that yourself. I think that has to do with more sales tax and business taxes and things like that. But I do know the law states that you have to file if you're involved. If you have a Social Security number and you're a citizen, and you have surpassed the minimum amount that you can make, then the law says that you need to file. Failure to file is a crime. So we don't want to do that. We want to file. Just make sure that you're ready to never use that number again. File your taxes, and that's that. And that's that. And don't ever use that Social Security number again for anything. So, now the last thing that we haven't touched on is everyone likes to claim that they're a citizen of the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of Israel. Well, if you look, I believe the kingdom of Israel is actually stated in Scripture 8 times. And it's something that we can claim. Under the United States Code, that's USC, Title 8, Section 1481, baptism is a ceremony to a foreign sovereign, which qualifies you to expatriate if you wish. Now, I did. That's exactly what I did. I do not want my name associated with anything that's going to come down whenever Yah comes to take care of Babylon. I don't want to be involved. And if you haven't caught on yet, if your name is on a voter's registration, Social Security, claiming to be a citizen, all of that, that makes you the lifeblood of Babylon. You're the body of Babylon. Just like the body of Christ, they claim to be the body of Christ. Well, you know, what you bind on earth is bound in heaven. And those are contracts. That's contractual agreements. And the U.S. is just 2 pieces of paper in a filing cabinet. That's what my teacher told me, and I believed it. It's 2 pieces of paper in a filing cabinet. When the wrath of Yahuah comes, he's not going to be taking that out on 2 pieces of paper in a filing cabinet. He's going to go to the life's blood, the people that are in that system, the voters, the registered voters, the citizens, the people using the fiat, and using that system. That is the body of Babylon. Anyway, if you wish to claim expatriation, that will leave you with a status of a denizen. So nobody can say you don't belong here. In fact, you belong here more than they do, because you have just gave yourself the status of an individual, if you rescinded everything and claim that. And not only a status of an individual, but you've taken yourself back to the same status as the forefathers had before all of these contracts and this nasty, entangled mess that we have that is completely anti-Torah. So we can voluntarily expat by baptism. It's a peaceful act of expatriation. And for those who want to be a citizen of the kingdom of Israel, which that's what baptism is. It's a naturalization ceremony for citizenship. That's what Israel did when it comes to the Red Sea. That's what baptism's about. And you are leaving Babylon, the meat pots of Egypt. Egypt reflected Babylon. All the same. A system not of Yahuah. And people that keep the Torah don't use fiat commercial paper. We deal in property, not commerce in fiat. And we do private business, not public. Now, I'm going to touch on private business one more time. I think that I already have touched on it. And I'm going to wrap this up because that's all there is to it. Now, if you have questions, like I said, you can always write me at mylifeinlaw@att.net. Email me at mylifeinlaw@att.net. AT&T.net. So here's what the Supreme Court has said about our right to do business without government intrusion. And it goes to Hale versus Hinkle at 201 U.S. 43, 47, 1905. There is a clear distinction in this particular case between an individual and a corporation, and that the latter has no right to refuse to submit its books and papers for an examination at the suit of the state. The individual may stand upon his constitutional rights as a citizen. He is entitled to carry on his private business in his own way. His power to contract is unlimited. He owes no such duty to the state, since he receives nothing therefrom beyond the protection of his life and property. His rights are such as existed by law of the land long before the organization of the state, and can only be taken from him by due process of law, and in accordance with the Constitution. Among his rights are the refusal to incriminate himself, and the immunity of himself and his property from arrest or seizure except under the warrant of law. He owes nothing to the public so long as he does not trespass upon their rights. Upon the other hand, a corporation is a creature of the state. It is presumed to be incorporated for the benefit of the public. It receives certain special privileges and franchises, and it holds them subject to the laws of the state and its limitations of its charter. Its powers are limited by law. It can make no contract not authorized by its charters. Its right to act as a corporation are only preserved to it as so long as it obeys the laws of its charters. And that's Hale versus Hinkle. Now I have some notes here that says, when you have a social security number, a driver's license, a marriage license, when you're dealing with Federal Reserve notes and fiat commercial paper, you're that corporation that has no rights. You're the creature of the state. You're not acting as an individual. So I hope this helps. This is the last. This is number 3 out of 3 in how I came out of the system. And of course, I will be touching on other shows about how to use all of your powers to contract in a proper way, and how we do that in the future. So once you're out of the system, it's as simple as this. I can say 6 words and you should catch on. Buy, sell, trade, make, raise, grow. Buy, sell, trade, make, raise, grow. All without a social security number, and you will pretty much be unlimited. Sky's the limit. I'm going to wrap this series up. We'll continue the next show as far as how to trade in just weights and measures. And thank you for listening.